Good evening, Democrats. Thank you for joining us for tonight's Meet the Candidates. I'm Lauren Calmet, Political Director here at the Florida Democratic Party. Welcome to the show where we bring on Democratic candidates from across the state so you as constituents have an opportunity to hear directly from the Democrats on your ballot about the issues that matter the most to your community. We're streaming live from Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. So wherever you're tuning in from, welcome, and please keep the conversation going in the chat. Also, a huge thank you to everyone who will be replaying this video after we've concluded our live stream this evening. And with that, we are incredibly excited to introduce to you a few dedicated Democrats who are ready to flip Florida blue. Without further ado, let's bring on tonight's candidates. Tonight we have with us Jacquelyn McMiller running for mayor of Fort Myers, Joshua Lopez running for House District 77, and Anselm Weber running for House District 76. Thank you so much to all three of you for joining me this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you so much.
Let's start off with a quick introduction of our candidates. First off, we have Jacquelyn McMiller. Her reason for running is simple. She wants to lead Fort Myers in a new direction. She wants to reconcile the two sides of the city, embrace the unity, and allow the city to grow so developers, communities, children, and everyone can thrive. As mayor, her ultimate mission is to bring transparency, accountability, leadership, and integrity to the city. So good to see you, Jacquelyn.
Thank you so much for having me, Lauren. Thank you so much.
It's
a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you once again. We've also got Joshua Lopez. He's a near lifelong resident of Southwest Florida, And as a practicing attorney, he knows people from all walks of life and has solutions to the problems the community faces. He's running for the state legislature. Good to see you, Joshua.
Nice to see you. Thank you for having me.
And also on audio tonight, we've got Anselm Weber. He's a Democrat running for State House, also in Southwest Florida region. He is running on environmental justice, economic justice, and massive criminal justice reform, and believes we need an overhaul of the state's priorities to bend the needs of the working class and low-income Floridians. Good to have you, Anselm. We can't see you, but good to hear you.
I can see y'all, and thank you all for having me.
Absolutely. Why don't we go back to Jacquelyn? We'll start off with her for the first question. I detailed a little bit about her vision for the city, but let's dive a little bit further into that. Jacquelyn, can you please talk a little bit about what your first priority on day one would be once you are elected?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that we must do is be prepared for the fallout of what's been happening with COVID-19. We have a wonderful community here within the city, and as like many others, they have been affected tremendously by the COVID crisis. So at this point, what we're trying to do, and what I'd like to do, is ensure that all of our businesses, our families are prepared with the government being able to be prepared for what's going to be happening and the fallout from it. Make sure the CARES Act is in place, make sure the funding is in place, and ensure that we're testing, we're tracing, and we're being able to treat anything that comes ahead with regards to COVID-19. I think that right now we're in a crisis, and we need to be prepared to face that crisis as it comes.
Thank you so much, Jacquelyn. And one thing that I say all the time whenever I'm talking to candidates, especially Democratic candidates, is all of the things that we see time and time again on Democratic platforms are problems that have always existed within our communities and are now being magnified by COVID-19. COVID-19 is really bringing existing problems front and center. And this is true for no group more than it is for lower income residents. So I'll take it over to Anselm for this next question, because I know that this is front and center and part of his priority platform. Anselm, can you talk a little bit about what you would do to serve the needs of lower income residents in your area, and now especially with the economic fallout that we've seen with COVID-19?
Yeah, so I think my first priority getting into office, if elected, is to have a proper COVID-19 relief package. Mm-hmm. So I know that's going to be hard if we do not flip the Florida legislature to be blue. However, I think it's important to push for that. I think we need to have like $2,000 for each family. We need to be massively helping homeowners and renters and small businesses. And we need to work to improve the existing conditions. Like, we have Amendment 2 that will raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. If that does not pass, then I will be fighting front and center to have a minimum wage that meets the living wage. Moreover, also making sure that Medicaid is expanded. But with COVID-19, we need to massively contact trace, as Jacquelyn puts it. We need to making sure this public health crisis is dealt with, and then moving towards a place where we can get universal health care for the state. And along with that, trying to ensure that we are actually serving the needs of the people. Down here in Lee County, 53% of renters pay 30% or more of their income on housing. So that is going to be priority number one as well. It's having a proper COVID relief measures put in place, but then fixing the institutions that have been faltering to serve the needs of the people. For instance, the Fidelity Fund, Ron DeSantis this year cut about 2/3 of it that was supposed to go to affordable housing. He then spent that on corporate handouts, along with toll roads that do nothing but destroy the environment and only serve developers. So that will be first priority, but then also bringing the issues to the state legislature and being like, no, these issues have been, as you said, like, they're long-standing, and now that COVID-19 exists, it's just expediting the dislocation of low-income residents all across the board. So that is going to be priority number one when I get in office.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. And, I really think that you hit the nail on the head, which is that it is so great for all of our candidates to have ambitious platforms. And part of being able to see a lot of these ambitious platforms come to life is going to be electing more Democrats than we have. So it's not just about re-electing the Democrats that we already have in the state legislature. We certainly need a lot more. And we're really hoping for a blue wave next month. And we are just really hoping that we can elect a lot of them. And for a lot of our candidates, this is a really, really, really ambitious goal. A lot of these districts run very red for a variety of reasons. It could be redistricting. It could just be the political climate. But I'll lean into Josh Lopez for this next question, because I know that this conversation certainly does apply to you in your race. Your district leans conservative. So what is your message to conservative-leaning voters that might be interested in voting for you?
Well, I believe that we can certainly come out to areas of mutual agreement without sacrificing our democratic principles. So some areas which I think that we could do constructive work on, well, I'll lay them out. We can work on making it easier to work and work from home. There was a bill passed this year with bipartisan support that made it easier to obtain occupational licenses for various professions. And it was signed by the governor. And I think that we can continue that sort of work, especially in these economic times, to make it easier to get qualified to work in the profession of your choice, and also run a business or work from home. During the pandemic and lockdown, home crafts and cosmetics have been growing increasingly popular, but Florida rules restrict what you can do and what you can sell from your own home. So I think that we can ease up some rules on that. Also, I think that we can come to areas of agreement with deregulation, but it's a smart deregulation in a way that, again, does not conflict with our democratic values. I think that we can smartly deregulate zoning and making sure that we build up our city, make it easier to build higher density housing. I think we focus too much on single family zoning. I think that we need to make it easier to build up multifamily housing and mixed use housing, and that will build up our cities, which will decrease commute time. And that will actually be good for our environment. It will decrease sprawl, decrease carbon emissions, and make housing more affordable. Additionally, I think that we can do tax reform, but again, in a way that does not conflict with our democratic principles. I think that we can explore switching from a property-based tax system to a land-based tax system, and that will actually provide relief to several homeowners that have been taxed heavily for owning their homes and not necessarily have high incomes. So explaining it a little bit, I support taxing property on a fixed rate per area, and that will actually incentivize building up your property and disincentivize leaving your property idle. Again, the goal is to build up our cities, encourage building in our cities, encourage the market building up in our cities, and it would also further our goals of decreasing carbon emissions, because our cities will be more walkable. It will help with affordable housing, with using the power of the market and building up more. The principle is when you increase supply, the price goes down, and that will help with that. So I think that we have some areas of agreement on economics that we can pursue, that we can further our democratic principles, but also get some buy-in from Republican figures across the aisle, and also get support from conservative voters in my district.
Thank you so much, Joshua. And look, the state legislature, it's really a team sport on any issue. It's always important to consider who's on the other side of the aisle, because we've seen many times in the state legislature, we've been really surprised by the different ways that the Republicans have been willing to work with Democrats. So a willingness to do that is truly important, especially when you're in the minority party in any chamber of government. So thank you for sharing that. Let's go back to Jacquelyn. Jacquelyn, of course, is not running for the state legislature. She is running for mayor. Can you tell us a little bit more about what led to your decision to run for mayor?
Well, I'm a mom. I have been a corporate owner, CEO of my own corporation. But most of all, I've been a lifetime resident here of the city of Fort Myers. And I realized that, I was raised in one area of Fort Myers where I grew up, and it was more of the lower income and more predominantly Black and brown. And I realized after raising my kids and moving into another area on the more of the west side of Fort Myers, that it's a gated community. I raised my kids in a gated community. And I also realized that every person, we want the same things. And the city is divided. And every person wants to raise their children without fear of safety for their children. Everyone wants clean water. They want to not be exposed to toxicities in the water and our groundwater. And we literally have brown water coming out of the faucets of some of the area residents. We want a wonderful environment. We want to be able to enjoy what Fort Myers has to give. And I realized that by us being so separated, we have more that unites us than divides us. And I want to be able to reconcile these two sides of the city and embrace that unity and allow the city to grow in a way where we all can prosper. I'm big business. I believe in development. I believe in developing communities and those blighted areas that we can really focus on and raise the level of living for the people and for the community in and of itself. So everyone can prosper and can also be healthy. And I want to really work on bringing transparency and accountability and leadership, but most of all, integrity back to this city. I love this city. I know the people that live here, grown up here, have come to respect it. And we have some great people. And really, what I want to focus on is just bringing this city together. I've seen both sides of the city. I've lived on both sides of this city. And, and we can do better. And I want to be a part of that. And I'm really excited, to be a part of that.
Thank you so much, Jacquelyn, for sharing your vision. And I do want to kind of pick something out of what you had mentioned, which of course is clean water. We know that this is an issue that our constituents do care about, and this is an issue that Democrats have been fighting for a very long time. Anselm, I know that this is one thing that you've spoken about. Can you share with us a little bit about what you would do to stop the assault on clean water in the Southwest Florida region?
Yeah, so one of those things, this was actually addressed in the state legislature this year. Well, they attempted to address it. There was the Clean Waterways Act, and the purpose of it was to stop the nitrogen and phosphorus runoff from going into Lake Okeechobee and then down Caloosahatchee River, which then dumps down into the Fort Myers, Cape Coral metro coastline. So the easy in terms of it's not hard to do, it just means about building coalition of people who are willing to do it, is to reform the Clean Waterways Act so we have proper regulations on the nitrogen phosphorus, because with the Clean Waterways Act, this is all recommended by a task force, but they mostly ignored a lot of the task force's direction. And now the regulations that are in place to stop the phosphorus and nitrogen runoff are still in place, and they're still broken. They do not adequately regulate the problem. And then moreover, that is the in the short term what we can do regarding the clean water in the state is just to reform that act to make sure that there's absolutely proper regulations in place. We're going after corporations that exceed that. We have fines in place and punishment in place that actually it actually willfully punishes them to stop doing such a thing. And then what I've been working on with about 43 other state candidates is the Florida Climate and Economic Defense Initiative. And this is an initiative that is basically a Florida Green New Deal that's supposed to meet the goals of being carbon neutral or carbon negative by about 2030 or 2035. But moreover, it's even though it's combating climate change and it's bringing in jobs to the state, it's also stopping environmental pollution from happening. And if we make sure that these farms are not polluting in the waterways, we can then move on to more pressing issues with climate change, where we are at a severe risk. We're not only economically going to be destroyed by climate change, we're estimated to lose 76 billion by 2040 conservatively. But this is it allows us to, we have an environment. Our environment is constantly under assault. Miami is expected to be underwater in 80 years. This coastline is about the same latitude and has the same problems as Miami, so it's going to happen here. And then moreover, it's just the state is going to see a climate devastation that we need to work on. So clean water is essential to our area, but it's part and parcel the larger problem environmentally that we have to focus on. And I'm very grateful that so many candidates have stepped to the plate to talk about these issues, like Raka Baujid running for Florida House District 10. So I'm really excited. I mean, excited is the wrong word because it's such dire times, but I am excited that there's so many progressive candidates out there that are really pushing this issue in a very clear way. And I'm really looking forward to getting up to Tallahassee and working with them and actually bringing these issues to light and fighting for the right thing for our environment.
Thank you so much. And you did mention this a little bit, but I think that it should be obvious to everybody as of right now is that, environmental crisis will eventually lead to an economic crisis. We certainly need to prioritize our environment, otherwise our economy is going to suffer. And that's true more in Florida than likely almost any other state. We really, really, really can't afford to neglect our environment any further. And Florida voters do care a great deal about the environment. So Joshua, I understand that your district has been hit hard by outbreaks of red tide and cyanobacteria. What are your plans to deal with those? And did I pronounce cyanobacteria correctly?
You're spot on. So that is true. We have had major problems with those two types of algae, causing uncontrolled blooms and uncontrolled outbreaks. So I've actually consulted with 3 FGCU professors about the best way, best practices to deal with that. Essentially, the problem boils down to an excess of nutrients in the water. So the nutrients are phosphorus and nitrogen. So the way we get rid of that, well, we do have some rules, but we need to work on enforcement of those rules, and also need new rules. Lots of people like to point the finger at Big Sugar, and while Big Sugar does have a role, I think that it is a problem that actually the whole state contributes to, and we need the whole state to work toward a solution. So we need citizen education about the role in neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods, and commercial properties, and their contribution to the water problem. Essentially, the problem comes from runoff. Not just agricultural, but from lawns, from the commercial properties. When rain comes into the grass and the lawns, it leaches the chemicals, and that goes into the waterways. First line of defense is artificial ponds. Now, those retention and detention ponds, those ditches that you see, they actually serve a purpose, and their purpose is to filter out the chemicals in the water. Lots of people don't know that, and so they expect those ponds to be artificially maintained, strip out their native vegetation, and we can't have that. That native vegetation actually filters out the water. We also, so we need to encourage maintaining those ponds in a more natural state, because those ponds actually replace the wetlands that we have stripped out of our native environment. And I support preserving our wetlands and restoring our wetlands wherever possible, because those wetlands also filter out the water, and they contribute toward cleaner water. And we also need to have a system of accountability. And to that, my proposal is to have a statewide report card system. Just like our schools have report cards based on their performance, we need to have our neighborhoods, every city, every community be accountable and have a report card based on their contribution toward clean water. There's also some other rules that we need to tighten up. We need to have our wastewater treatment plants, they need to have a mandate to remove phosphorus from the water. Believe it or not, they do not have a mandate. We also need to have a unified system of statewide rules so that the rules do not change from community to community, so that it's clear what we need to do. We also need to increase monitoring to see where we have a problem with excess runoff and with clean water, and so we can address it quickly. We also need to have financial accountability from polluters, because a lot of the problems resulting in pollution come from lack of accountability. Once we have financial accountability, financial responsibility, we will see polluters change their behavior really quick. And so, and lastly, we also need to get buy-in from our local governments, especially our stormwater utilities. I think we can find a role for them in enforcing clean water rules.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Anselm, let's go back to you. What are, we've talked about it in broad terms, but if you could just expand once more, what are the critical issues you want to address in the Southwest Florida area?
Well, as I detailed, like I split them up into 3 categories. But they're all interchangeable in some degree or another. It's economic justice, criminal justice reform, and environmental justice. With economic justice, we know the issues. We have $8.56 as our minimum wage. We have millions of people paying way too much in rent. Way too many people are foregoing healthcare or have inadequate healthcare. We have so many people that do not have access to collective bargaining in the workplace. We only have 6.2% of all people that are working that are in our union, and most of those are public unions, which have long-standing unions. Whereas for the private sector, it's basically impossible with right to work. So my solution to that is a living wage for all, expanding affordable housing beyond the Sadowski Fund, increasing public housing, having I don't know if I said right, ending right to work laws, as I said, but absolutely ending right to work laws, and then Medicaid expansion, of course, because that money is already allocated by the federal government. We have to arm wrestle the Republicans regarding that. But then on top of that, trying to get to universal health care at the state level in some way or another, whether it's sort of like single payer system or maybe a public option or nonprofits for corporations. That will be difficult at the state level. I very much understand that, but I do think that's worthwhile to take on. And then environmental justice, that's the Florida Green New Deal, which not only will adequately address the climate change problem, it will employ a lot of people. There will be a state jobs guarantee so that anybody that can work will be able to work and have a job that pays a living wage, has collective bargaining benefits, and is doing the things we need to do to stop climate change.
Excellent. Thank
the
you.
criminal justice system, for lack of a better term, is parasitic on working people. Sorry, did you say that?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Go on.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, yes. In the sorry about that. Yeah, with massively overhauling a lot of tenets of our criminal justice system, we have mandatory minimum laws that take away any judge's discretion from any given case, and they contribute to excess sentencing in the criminal justice system. And then on top of that, we should decriminalize drug possession so that no one is going to prison for drug possession. They're getting adequate help, because we need to treat these problems like what they are. They're a public health issue. They're not a criminal issue. Giving somebody prison time for a substance abuse problem will only increase their chance of relapse, and then will further make somebody unlikely to gain gainful employment, which will then contribute to more relapse. And then with that, we will look at drug trafficking cases in a case-by-case basis based on poverty, because most people that get incarcerated for drug trafficking, they're not kingpins. They're not, they're not, the people from The Wire or anything like that. They're people caught up in a drug conspiracy, and they have no means of having gainful employment, because a lot of these people grow up in largely economically depraved areas with little access to decent schooling, little access to decent housing, little access to decent gainful employment. So those two things are huge, along with ending cash bail and then giving equivalent funding to public defenders' offices that we do to prosecution. So I think with these things, we can massively overhaul a lot of the negative aspects of our criminal justice system. And I do believe in reallocating certain city budgets to affordable housing and to better schooling. Here in Fort Myers, we have about 34% of the city budget going to policing, whereas affordable housing and schooling have fallen to the wayside. So I think that there's a way to shift around a lot of the priorities of the criminal justice system. But the goals of all these things are to help out working people, make sure that our environment, in terms not just our ecosystems, but our environments in our cities, our towns, they're equitable and feasible for everybody to have a decent life. Because in Florida, and which is ubiquitous across the state, it is incredibly hard for working people to meet the needs they need to. People are paying way too much in rent. People are hardly able to afford healthcare, even with the Affordable Care Act. So I think all these priorities need to be within, like, environmental justice is not different from social justice. Criminal justice reform is not different than social justice reform. These things are all work in tandem, and I'm happy that I've seen a lot of candidates like actually understand these problems and articulating them well. And that is what I would be focusing on if I were to be elected.
Excellent, thank you. And one thing that I do love that you touched upon is that some of these issues, necessarily won't be resolved at the state legislative level. Some of them can be addressed at the municipal level. Some of them need to be addressed in Congress. However, having candidates that are bold enough to open up these conversations, even if we don't know the right answer today, is a very big deal, because time and time again we've seen a lot of Republicans deny that these problems are problems. And we as Democrats are able to acknowledge those and have been fighting for a lot of these issues for a very long time. So to have candidates that are at least willing to open up a conversation and, to bravely say, this is a problem, how do we resolve it, has been, I think has made a huge difference in terms of the way that that campaigning works and the way that constituents decide who they're voting for. So thank you for bringing up so many big questions front and center. Even if it's not necessarily in your wheelhouse as a state legislative candidate, these are all questions that constituents deserve to be participating in.
Absolutely.
Joshua, let's piggyback off on that, because I know you're also running for state legislature, and a lot of these problems, as I said, have been ongoing and long term. So what, in your opinion, is the greatest long-term challenge that your district faces, and how do you plan to resolve it?
The number one challenge that my district faces is climate change. And that's also the number one challenge that the state as a whole faces. As you know, Florida is surrounded on three sides by water. My district, consisting mostly of Cape Coral, also three sides surrounded by water. So what do we do? Well, there's a lot of things that we can do, but my priority as a legislator is going to be to introduce a bill to price in the cost of carbon. We need to price in the economic and environmental cost of carbon, because when polluters emit CO2 into our atmosphere, they are causing damage to the environment that the rest of us have to pay for, but they are not paying for it. And so my bill will charge $50 per ton of CO2 emitted into the atmosphere. And this will promote accountability and responsibility. And I think that this is something that we really do need in our state. We need to use the mechanisms of the market to change the behavior of market actors. What does that mean? It means that businesses respond to what hits their pocketbook. And if we want businesses to operate in a clean and green way, we need to affect their pocketbook. If we charge for their emission of carbon, they'll seek ways to reduce what they emit into the atmosphere. They will seek out cleaner ways of operating. We also need to make sure that we live up to our namesake. We are the sunshine state. We need to be the solar power state. So we need to push for 100% renewable energy used by state facilities. So I want the state of Florida to run on 100% renewable energy. And we also want private citizens and private businesses we want to encourage that transition to renewable energy as well. We need to explore building large-scale renewable plants here in our state. We need to promote solar installation. We need to find ways to encourage the national government to end the solar panel tariffs that have been imposed by this administration. We also need to maintain our current non-carbon energy infrastructure. And we also need to decrease reliance on cars by encouraging density and public transit. As I stated in one of my previous responses, one of the keys to this is to build up our cities, reduce sun sprawl. It will be good for our economy, but it will also be good for our environment and our long-term effectiveness and survival as a state.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And, it's such a breath of fresh air to hear candidates prioritizing and putting the environment front and center. And I do have to say that especially this cycle, I am just so proud of our Democrats for continuing to talk about this issue and continuing to urge Floridians to consider the environment and renewable energy when casting their votes this cycle. Also, another hot topic that has come front and center this spring and this fall, of course, has been criminal justice and policing. Jacquelyn, I'd like to hear a little bit more about what your vision would be as mayor.
Well, as Anselm stated, all of these issues work in tandem with each other. But one of the things that we've seen around the nation is some of the things that have been happening with regards to policing and criminal justice and police reform. So one of the things that I've decided to do I propose a fair approach to policing in Fort Myers. So that basically is FAIR, and we're looking at more funding for and investing in training to improve those particular investigative techniques and best practices for our law enforcement officers. We want to be able to support them in ensuring that they're getting the proper training to do the best investigative and learn the best investigative techniques as possible. And that's the only way we're going to be able to support them. And then that way they can be more fair to the people that they are policing. Another thing is we're looking at more accurate. We're creating a collection of more empirical data of policing processing and, going back and looking at what's happening, looking at the factual basis of what they are doing, and also coming back and developing a QA process to ensure that they are following through with the necessary processes out in the field. We need to focus on impartiality, implementing those standards to raise awareness of the implicit bias training, as well as implicit bias within policing. Anytime we need to understand that no matter what, we have our own bias in some way, shape, or form. So how do we become aware of that? And that's what the implicit bias training is for. And last but not least, we're looking at results in determining objectively. Are they looking at those investigations objectively? What led to those investigations? And also, are they completing investigations from an objective aspect to make those informed decisions? It kind of goes back to when they first started with computers, junk in, junk out. If you gather sufficient information, therefore you can make sufficient and well-informed decisions. So I'm looking at that fair approach to policing, supporting police officers, making sure that they're gathering, sufficient information, but also creating that collection of empirical data so we can learn from any mistakes that we may have made and also move forward with correcting those mistakes as well. So this is supporting the training of the officers, supporting the officers in and of themselves, and going back to true community policing. How do we go back to that? And we're looking at that fair approach to make sure that that happens.
Thank you so much for sharing your vision with us. And we are just about running up on all the time we have for tonight, but I will kick the last question to you, Jacquelyn, before we close out. What has your favorite moment on the campaign trail been so far?
Oh, wow. I actually have two.
Okay.
And I was out. I've grown up and raised my kids that we show our blessings and we share our blessings. And I was out feeding the homeless with at one point, and a woman came to me, and she saw my sign on the side of my door on my car. And she says, "Oh, you're running for mayor?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And I gave her a plate of food, and she gave me $2. And I told her, I said, "You don't need to pay. I'm just giving this to you, you know?" And she says, "No, I want you to have it. You're running for mayor, and I want to support you." And this is someone that really took the very last of what they had and was able to share that with me and show support. And it really touched me, and it gave me even more, more, energy to be willing to step out and do what I'm doing. And another incident, just actually recently, last week, I saw a young woman, and I met her at one of the gatherings that we were at, and she started to cry because she told me that she had not seen anyone like myself, and she saw myself in her. And she congratulated me, but she told me that it really touched her and it gave her hope because she was actually thinking about moving from Fort Myers. And I told her, this is what we do, not only as women, but as people. We try to make a difference. We don't run away from our issues. We embrace them, and we go in to focus on making the necessary changes that need to be made. We make good trouble. And that's what I wanted her to take away from that. And it was a wonderful experience. And this entire process has been enlightening. It's been warm, and it gives me more hope in doing what we need as a team, like with Joshua and Anselm and many other Democrats here, to be a team, move forward, work with with everyone to make this process beautiful. And we can do it. And I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Jacquelyn, for sharing both of those very beautiful stories with us. And thank you so much to all of our candidates for joining us tonight. It was wonderful to get to know each of you a little bit better. And of course, thank you to everybody who tuned in this evening from Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. We are so close to Election Day, but you don't need to wait to vote. Vote by mail has already started, and over 1 million Florida Democrats have already cast their ballots. You can view your personalized Democratic voting guide at sunshine.vote and find additional information there. You'll also be able to see all of the Democrats on your ballot, including recommendations for the constitutional amendments showing up on your ballot this year. Remember, if you have any questions about voting or if you need any help, please call our 24/7 voter assistance hotline at 833-VOTE-FLA or 833-868-3352. Our team is ready to answer your questions around the clock. That number, once again, is 833-868-3352. Thank you once again to all of our viewers for tuning in, and everybody stay safe out there. you.